The reason we need community in tantric life, in queer life, is that it's very hard to be this weird by yourself.
Yes.
Gender has been used as a weapon to create some sort of systemic change. We have to get looser and more inclusive, and we have to find more allies. Tantra has always been the cultural revolution.
I'm curious if you can teach us one thing about breath and orgasm, because
I was just going to say, ecstasy breathing is a really good place to start.
Okay, let's hear about ecstasy breathing. One usable tool around that.
Yeah.
I'm Layla Martin. I'm your host of This Tantric Life. This podcast is for you to learn about and be able to use the incredibly powerful system of Tantra in your life. I have been teaching and studying classical and neo-Tantra for over 20 years. And when you apply that to sex, love, and relationships, as I love to do, you end up having conscious relationships, the deepest, most epic and magical sex, and the kind of intimacy that you get to be grateful for on your deathbed.
Welcome to This Tantric Life. Thank you so much for joining me here. I am Layla Martin, your host, and I'll be joined today by Barbara Carrellas. She's the author of Urban Tantra, which is my go-to recommended book for anyone who wants to learn neo-tantric practices. So to me, it is the best place to go if you're like, I want to learn about sexuality, I want to learn about energy, I want to learn about how to have energy orgasms. This book is an excellent guide and I highly recommend it. So welcome, Barbara. So I really wanted to tell the story of when I first saw you in my life.
Okay.
Which was at Stanford University as an undergrad, right? I had to do an internship. And so I picked Dr. Carol Queen, who ran the Center for Sex and Culture. She was a luminary in the field, is still a luminary in the field, around sort of sexuality work and inclusiveness and sexual empowerment, right? And so when I first was looking into her to be like, do I want this person to guide my internship? I looked into things she'd made. And one was this video on female ejaculation, right? I'm looking into this in probably 2005. And this video was probably from the 90s. I'm not sure, like 1992, 1996. And the general sort of path of the video, as I remember it, is you, Carol Queen, Annie Sprinkle, and some other woman basically being like, doctors say that female ejaculation is not a thing. And you're like, we're gonna show you, right? And you all legs spread open. And it's like one of those 1990s cameras that has like the flip on it, right? Where you can like see that, yeah. And you're like, we'll show them. And you all ejaculate directly onto the camera. And I was like, whoa. I was like, number one, fucking dope. Number two, I was like, we can do whatever we want. Like, and to just see women claim their sexuality, their bodies, their expressiveness that way, and to do it on camera. I hadn't thought about it until I was coming to this podcast, but that fundamentally changed my view of what could be possible. I know it laid the foundation for me to be like, oh, I could do sexuality videos on YouTube, right? It gave such huge permission.
Great.
So to me, you paved the way in so many ways for so many people to give themselves so much more permission to be their sexual selves. And God bless you for ejaculating on that 1990s camera.
Oh, and I did some really wonderful, important videos with some amazing people in those days in the early 90s. I really want to just highlight what you said about permission. It is my mission is permission and possibilities. It's what I think people are looking for.
Yeah.
And with permission, especially self-permission, which is what you just described, we can do almost anything. And then if people just give us a few more possibilities that we haven't thought of, truly the infinite is possible. So thank you for highlighting that, because I hope everybody out there gives themselves permission today to do something that they thought they couldn't do or shouldn't do.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I also was like, okay, So Carol Queen's definitely my advisor.
Yeah, I was going to
number
say,
one.
you chose right.
Number two, I'm going to start touching myself like this, right? So yes. And one of the ways I wanted to start this was you are deeply passionate about Tantra being practiced by people of all genders, all sexual orientations. This is a
All
hallmark
races,
of your work.
all body shapes, all abilities. That is the hallmark of Urban Tantra.
Yes. And a big part of what got you into Tantra was your experience of the AIDS epidemic in New York City in, I believe, the late 80s and 90s.
Late 80s is when I hit the wall. I had lost, well, the losing of people went on for 15 years. But by 1988-ish, it was at a peak personal meltdown stage. I went to the New York Healing Circle because I'd heard that it was the support group for people with AIDS and people who loved them. And it was founded on Louise Hay's work. She led the Hayride in LA at the time, which I'd been using for a few years anyway. So I went, oh, this sounds perfect. There I met Annie Sprinkle and Joseph Kramer.
Wow.
And Joseph Kramer did not live in New York. Annie did, but he was in town frequently. And we became friends, and I was working in the Broadway theater at the time and did for some 35 years. So that didn't change, but it is also why I knew so many people dying of AIDS. A lot of gay people in the theater. So anyway, Annie and Joe and I kept asking the question, okay, so if we heal ourselves more, which didn't always mean staying on the planet, if we find our spiritual center, great, we need that. But what about sex? Right now, people are scared sexless, but that will change. And this virus will just go on and on and on. How do we transform how we do sex?
Yeah.
So it came very much from the sexual question. Tantra is not all about sex, God knows. Thank you for calling this podcast This Tantric Life, which reminds people in the title of that it's bigger than just sex. But anyway, Joseph had been studying Taoist sexuality. He was a massage therapist and a rebirther, someone who deals with healing through breath work. And he was putting the erotic massage and the breath and the touch and the eroticism together to see what he could come up with. And he came up with a legendary erotic massage referred to in some parts of the world as tantric massage. No, it's not 3,000 years old, people. It's something Joe came up with to save lives in the 80s. But anyway, we've all touched each other erotically for a whole lot of time. But his particular way of moving energy around on the breath, it was a way that you could be sexual in a deeply, deeply, deeply powerful way without sharing bodily fluids, which of course was the issue. So Joseph was doing great work with that with gay men. Annie and I decided, well, we've been reading that in the East, especially in Tantra, tantric sex is more about energy and not so much about bodies in terms of where you place your focus. And we went, oh, that sounds really promising. So we started exploring Tantra as best we could. Of course, it's Neo-Tantra. That's what we're talking about here. From Tantra teachers who passed through New York. Quite honestly, we didn't have the time or at that time the resources to go apprentice to a guru in India, which we might have done if we weren't hardcore New Yorkers.
It's hard to leave the city.
Through a pandemic.
Just because I don't think people who weren't connected to that era, right? And there's probably some listeners who aren't really familiar with that.
You're right. Good
It's
point.
like, it was like a funeral every weekend, right? Or several, just a level of loss.
It was, some weeks I lost 4 people I knew. We were having gang memorial services. The pages of obituaries in gay newspapers were bigger than the rest of the paper.
Wow.
It was an absolute, and it went on and on and on and on and on. 10 years before there was even the slightest treatment, and that treatment was pretty horrific too. It was a plague of incredible proportions, and it was ignored by the government for as long as they could do it. So we were totally on our own to deal with this. So Annie and I started studying Tantra to save lives and make dying people's lives more meaningful.
Right.
Most of people had been tossed out of their religion of family. They were could be thrown out of their families. They were dying essentially alone, except of course for community. And we wanted an erotic practice that felt healing, was safe, provided a spiritual component, Tantra, and a sense of healing, dying healed.
Yeah.
Dying in love.
Right. Which is original Tantra, right? Like I remember
Thank you.
a great quote one time. I don't remember who said it, but they said, any spiritual teacher worth their salt is teaching you how to die well.
Yes.
And how to live well.
Yes. And because the Tantra we were learning from the people who passed through, many of which were students of Osho in before he came to America in India, not all, but some, was that Tantra was a way of going through life where you leapt into the fire of life. It wasn't about, it'll be so much better in heaven. It'll be so much better in some afterlife. It's now. And the way we reach enlightenment, the way we reach spiritual understanding, the way we reach the big unknown is through the bodies we chose to get born into here on earth. So whether it's AIDS and death or sex and ecstasy, we dive into it as with totality, and we come out on the other side cleansed and transformed. I can't remember the teacher who explained enlightenment as, you don't get enlightened like in, oh, you're enlightened. It's like the planes of a gemstone. You can be enlightened on this plane facing that way and completely unenlightened over there because you haven't polished that facet. That's the word I'm looking for. You haven't polished that facet yet. So we polished a lot of facets at the Healing Circle, but that is how Annie and I got into Tantra. And we would go to a Tantra workshop. They were, at the time, Neo-Tantra workshops were white, middle-class, middle-aged, heterosexual. There was huge emphasis on the divine masculine and the divine feminine, which meant that the room had to be gender balanced. I don't even know what that means anymore. But at the time, it meant people who identified as men and people who identified as women. And when Annie and I would go as a couple, people would try to separate us, quite forcefully, I might add, and pair us up with some available
naughty
man.
lesbians.
And
you
we're
need
like,
a man.
And it won't work.
Right.
It won't work.
Yeah.
And we're like, we're good.
Yeah.
Really. We'll happily work together and fail.
Right.
And of course, we were practicing this a lot. So we were pretty good at getting, and we were pretty good at sex anyway. So we were pretty good at getting high off things like breath and connection and heart and all that. And then put us in a room, because we are basically exhibitionists. And that energy feeds more. I love group erotic and group spiritual energy. And we were flying, and the couples in the room were like, gee, I kind of want what they have. And they left us alone. So we would then come back to the Healing Circle the next day, the next week, and say, okay, here's what we learned over the weekend. Anybody want to try it? And those who were physically able would say, sure. And we would see if it worked for this group of 95% gay men. And if it did, we'd go, great, and go out and get something else and bring it back. And if it didn't, we'd go, no problem. And so we were just all we wanted to do was offer things that would make life a bit more worth living while they were living.
Yeah, absolutely.
And make their dying a little less painful.
Wow. I want to highlight a couple of the things you said because I was raised Catholic.
Me too.
And it creates such a split in life when you think all the good things that are happening must be from God and all the bad things must be devil.
And that's what they were saying at the time. You brought this on yourself.
Yeah. So then something
This is
hard
God's
happens.
punishment to you.
And then on top of that, the shame, the fear, the embarrassment, the like, am I going to hell? The like, is this God punishing me? Right? Like, why would we ever do that to people psychologically? And true, like classical Tantra, right, teaches, as do many of the very ancient religious traditions, the mystical traditions, God is in absolutely everything, right? And you find your way of relating beyond your mind to why hard things happen, why death is so intense, why a pandemic can happen, right? But you find it through your heart and through your knowing, not through your head. Now, a spiritual tradition like that invites you to be intimate with all of life, including the hardest parts. For me, being at my stepfather's bedside and midwifing his death was one of the most beautiful parts of my whole life. I was able to be intimate with him in late stage cancer because of Tantra.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, sister.
And that, like, yes, the energy orgasms are magnificent because the ecstasy, as you say, the phrase I learned from you, ecstasy is necessary. And it's taught me to be with all of life, which I think is like the greatest gift.
It's what you just said was, I meet God on the other side of these experiences.
Yeah.
And you're making me cry. And some of these experiences are, wow. And some of them are, wow. But there's, when you sit with it, when you be with it, when you take it into your heart, you smack right into the God you were looking for.
Yes. Yes.
That's why Tantra is a spiritual practice, people.
I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to my teachings and if you want to support this podcast, the best way to do it is to sign up for my email list. Email list sounds old school, and yet it is where I share my most intimate teachings, the path, process, heartbreak, and triumph of my life, and so much of the content that I make for you on a regular basis. So the way you get on the email list is by heading over to laylamartin.com, put your email address into any of the boxes. You can also sign up for cool practices like sex magic or energy orgasm, totally free. Heading on over to laylamartin.com, signing up with your email address. This supports the podcast. It supports this entire work and is the #1 way for you to receive the highest teachings of this path. And I love you and Annie being in the workshops, flying, right? And I said before we actually started filming, I was like, I wanted to highlight that I would not be the Tantrika I am without my experiences with women. That my high priestess, girlfriends, lovers, more platonic friends, when we practice together, when we raise Kundalini together, when we do energy orgasm together, when we make love to each other, there are transmissive fields of wonder and awe that in some ways are no different from a heterosexual experience, right? Like it's undifferentiated. It is the magic of two human beings.
Right.
And there is a specialness to my sexual relationships with women, my tantric practices with women that I would never receive if I was only with a man. And I could imagine the same goes for two men together.
Right. Exactly. You've got it. So, Urban Tantra came about because a reporter from Time Out, New York was asking me questions about my Tantra workshops, which had been recommended to him. And he said, well, what makes your Tantra different from everybody else's? And I said, sitting in my very tiny apartment in Hell's Kitchen, it's a kind of urban Tantra thing. And I went, I think I'll keep that. And because I was looking, I did not set out to do queer Tantra or gay Tantra or kinky Tantra, all of which have been folded into urban Tantra. I was just out to get everybody in the same room together because it became clear to me that we were all so similar. no matter what we thought our gender was, what we thought our sexual preference was, we all wanted the same things, something more. We all wanted more permissions. We all wanted more possibilities. And if we could just get together in the same room, magic could happen faster. And I'm big about efficiency. I really am. Side note, in 2003, I got an invitation from sex educator and author Tristan Taormino to come help found an event for sex positive people. It wasn't a kinky event. It wasn't a tantra event. It wasn't a swingers event. It wasn't a furries event. It was going to bring...
Why would you go to this event?
everybody together under the same tent, so to speak.
Now I get it.
And everybody was going to be there. And every kind of teacher in every community that did workshops, we all went, really? Because it sounded frightening. It really did. And I'm like, wow, I've been preaching this urban tantra, we're an inclusive thing for a few years now. I'm nervous. Okay, that's how other people feel. Great. Let's dive into this. The event became Dark Odyssey. And indeed, what we learned very quickly was that when we got over our stuff about how the other person must perceive us, which is what it usually is, right? We found out how much we had in common, how we were looking for the same intangibles in our play, in our, we were getting the same spiritual payoffs just because we played in the realm intensely. Because as you were saying, when you are in an intense situation and commit yourself intensely, you meet God.
Yeah.
So I went, okay, we're on to something here. And this inclusion thing is working. So over time, Urban Tantra, we are, in my professional training program, we have a whole segment on conscious kink, Tantric kink. Which is heart-centered, whether you are doing SM work and it's dominant and submissive, you are doing that from the heart. You are doing that with the heart. Your connection is heart connection. If you are doing intense sensation, AKA pain, for people who love that, you are doing that from the heart. You are touching people from the heart. You are holding space and you are being responsible for their deep emotional and spiritual unfolding. That's what you're doing. And like most kinky people understand that.
Yeah.
And if you are a gender expansive person, if it's all about energy, why do genitals matter so much? We don't ask people. I do not use the terms divine masculine and feminine, except to acknowledge they exist, as I did earlier in our chat, because I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I've always identified as femme, but never as, yeah, okay, woman, because that's the group I'm in. But I've always been quite gender bent. The phrase drag queen in a woman's body, I'm one of those. And so I love the non-binary gender expression that is being revealed. It's always been there, revealed. And it's a huge part now of Urban Tantra. And people who identified as cisgendered, people who were assigned a gender at birth and still identify with that gender, cisgendered people come to Urban Tantra workshops and often go, oh, I think I'll dance between the genders for a while in this exercise. Oh my God, that was fun. I'm like, yes, you're getting it. You're getting it. You're getting it. I don't want you to choose except for in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some of the things that Neo-Tantra has held dear, like gender, as you know, what's funny about that? You read no white person has read all the Tantra stuff.
I alone as a white woman have read every single ancient tantric song.
I know if someone had it would be you. Anyway, you know that all the Hindu gods and goddesses are always in transformation, right?
They're always in transformation.
And usually from gender to gender.
They can switch gender. So Vishnu dresses up as Mohini and seduces the world. And there's Ardhana Ishvara, which is the half woman, half man Shiva. It's very flexible. But I did actually want to talk for a second on like, how did Tantra get so heteronormative, right? Because I have thought about this myself, right? Part of it is that the remaining texts of classical Tantra that we have come from Middle Ages India.
Thank you.
They're largely written by men. The Middle Ages, all over the world, anywhere that had civilization as opposed to ancient tribal practices, right? That had gone through its process of becoming far more civilized, having urban centers, was typically not friendly to queer experiences or not super embracing. Now, there was a variety, right? Like I would say Europe was far more gnarly in terms of persecution and violence, right? And that originated from Christian teachings about, homosexuality being an expression of the devil, but nowhere really was super friendly in terms of, civilized places that had patriarchy established. And so when we're reading these texts, we have to take them with a grain of salt. Like no ancient text from any society, no matter how wondrous, right? And I love Indian culture and I love ancient Indian culture. And it gave us so much art and beauty and architecture and wonder and magic and all these incredible spiritual teachings that have changed my life. And you can find texts about how to use certain mantras to seduce virgins to have sex with you in classical tantric texts. So you always have to read through the lens of a human bias happening.
Thank you. As they were in Christian times. Most of the Gospels were written, many, many, many years after Christ had died by people who didn't know him. And then we go into the Middle Ages. But that's another topic. But you're so right. So
that was part of it. And I did just want to note really quick, because you cited Osho, that Osho's teachings I find to be marvelous, right? And he did so much to crack open the liberatory states of the world and specifically innovated practices that were so good at not just teaching you to meditate, but to actually find liberation and acceptance in your human form. And he was very heteronormative as far as I know.
And you can pick up books from Osho because they printed everything that came out of his mouth. So there's hundreds of books and you go, oh, you sexist pig. And you have to put that one aside.
Yeah.
And go to, remember our thing about the facets of enlightenment and go to the places where those facets are clear enlightenment.
Yes.
As opposed to the ones that are still a Hindu Indian male.
Yeah.
Our need to make people all perfect or all devil is just crazy making.
I'm excited to take a moment and share with you about the Vita Coaching Certification. This program has been around for almost 10 years, and it is my highest offering. The sexual wellness industry is forecast to be a $125 billion industry by the year 2026. Why is this? Because people are more ready than ever to express their sexuality and build deeply connected, meaningful relationships, and also, obviously, to have the most outrageous orgasms and erotic experiences of their lives. But most people are never taught how to do any of this, how to have extraordinary relationships, how to have the sex they really crave. So they're looking for qualified, confident professionals to teach them. And my Vita Sex, Love, and Relationship Coaching Certification is a powerful 1-year professional certification that's helped more than 2,000 coaches make their way to becoming incredibly successful and highly paid sex, love, and relationship professionals. But this program doesn't just train you in every aspect of the coaching process so that you can build a successful online business. Vita Coaching will also walk you through the personal transformation of a lifetime because the best coaches have done the work themselves. You'll discover so many transformative techniques like breathwork, meditation practices, self-pleasuring tools that you'll apply to your own life first, and then you'll use these same proven tools and techniques to get laser-focused results for your clients. We We also hold an exclusive live embodiment retreat just for Vita coaching students and alumni every year. In this retreat, you'll experience 7 days of live teaching with the Vita teachers and I, and really refine your skills as a sex, love, and relationship coach. So if you feel called to claim your spot in this multi-billion-dollar industry and transform not only your own life, but the life of so many others around the world, you can join me inside the Vita coaching certification now at laylamartin.com/Vita coaching. That's laylamartin.com/Vita coaching, VITA. I do want to say, and I would love to hear your opinion on this, because I've leaned into this curiosity myself, right? In terms of like, also the Indian gods and goddesses can switch, and they are largely heterosexual, like they're married, right? You've got them all paired off together, and Shiva's with various female goddess consorts, but it's, Parvati, or it's Kali, or it's, Sati. And so in this, what I've really felt into is there's this divine play where on one hand, the invitation is to learn to experience the unique flavor of you in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, part of that can be to take on identities, to play with them, right? Just like theater, right? You play, if you're going to play a woman, right? There's an essence that you can step into, that you're going to embody and express and experience, right? And any drag
depending
queen will
on
tell
the
you,
character,
right? That there's a quality of woman they're stepping into, right?
Good.
This is also part of, the trans experience, which is not universal, and I absolutely cannot speak to it, but there is a valuing of being a gender expression, right? Where certain gender expressions can feel like home, and certain other ones can feel not home to us as beings, right? And so there's this, to me, divine masculine and divine feminine can be an invitation to understand how to play a part of your identity in this lifetime, should you choose to do it. Should it fit you?
Yes, absolutely.
I think people get really lost is like David Data style, right? There can be these teachings of like, well, men are like this and women are like this. And you're actually getting a prescriptive teaching, meaning if I'm going to inhabit divine feminine, I must act like this. Whereas in my experience, if I put people who identify as femme or identify as women into an experience where they can connect to their full energetic power and their sovereignty as a being, they will express what I would call divine feminine, which is my fully empowered truth through the part of me that feels feminine in this lifetime or feels like a woman in this lifetime, right? And there can be a whole expression of that I don't think we've mapped nearly as well as we should have, if at all, in our modern society, which is so many other gender expressions, right? Or non-binary gender expressions, right? It's not just woman that we're invited to experience in this lifetime or man. There's so many other iterations of gender. So to me, you have this pathway of going in. And when I say divine feminine, I mean how I feel when I'm like, look, in this lifetime, for me personally, and it's such a personal experience, I have this female body. I have this pussy. I have these breasts, right? And when I'm fully inhabiting myself, there's like a deliciousness that I want to lick in terms of my experience of womanhood. Right? That's so beautiful. But I think what gets lost is me having an experience of womanhood should not mean that nobody else can claim their experience of gender, whatever that is for them, or that they can have an experience of gender totally independent of what their genitals look like, or which genitals they were born with. But I believe what happened in society is we got taught these gender expressions, and there's only two, and they look like this. For me, my life's work has been busting myself and women out of, this is the box you get as a woman.
You've just hit on something that intersects with my last professional training program group. And I just got to say, I am blessed with the quality of people the intelligence, the willingness, the creativity of the people who show up for this program. I've just got to say, and shout out to my cohort, Elise Bish, who helps enroll these amazing beings. At the last one, we did a gender exercise that has been changing over the years with times, but finally hit the end of its usefulness. It really jammed into a wall. And the gender nonconforming people just said, I'm so fucking over gender. Can we please stop talking about gender? And I'm like, say more. Sorry. And one particular person says, it just doesn't matter. We have gender. We have talked about this to death. We're starting to beat each other up in the community with it. Are you doing it right? Are you doing it wrong? What it comes down to is sexism, people. And I just sat there and went, oh, let's take 3 breaths on that. You want to go further on that? Just think about it. Everything feminine is denigrated and everything male is honored, basically, systemically. And that's where it starts. And I realized that Tantra, ever since they said that, I'm like, let's go back to some home truths. Let's get simple. Let's get basic here. I think they're right. And so I'm looking at the fact that now that the academic word is intersectionality, but you can't divorce the experience of whatever gender you're walking with, whatever race you're walking with, whatever you're walking in, with whatever ability you have or don't have. It's all connected. And there's no magic answer in or out of it. But I am trying very hard right now to stay soft and open to this very physicalized notion of inclusivity, which is to say, gender has been used as a weapon, as have all these others, to create some sort of systemic change. We have to get looser and more inclusive, and we have to find more allies to recognize that it's not a racial problem, it's not a gender problem, it's not an ability problem. It's all of those things. It's all of those things. And what I think Tantra brings to the table, Tantra has always been, as I understand it historically, not just a spiritual practice, certainly not just a sexual practice. That's like a panful in Lake Erie, of what Tantra's about. It's just what we need out of Tantra that makes it sound that way. But that Tantra is a revolutionary practice. It was in its inception. It was the alternative to the very aesthetic. I can never say that word properly. Aesthetic.
Aesthetic.
Thank you. Deprecatory practices of certain extreme Hindu sects, sects. It was a class revolution. It was busting through the caste system of India. It was a cultural revolution. It was not popular, which is why it kept getting shoved underground, which is why so much of the teachings aren't written down or were destroyed. So I'm interested in the revolution. I'm interested in getting to the revolution in the same way that I'm interested in learning about death, or interested in learning about sex, or interested in learning about ecstasy. I want to get through the revolution the way I'm getting through all the other things and polish that side of my enlightenment.
Yeah.
That's a tantric life to me. And it's deeply, deeply queer. I think Tantra has always been a very queer practice.
Well, this is, in my heart and in my practices, when I feel into the ancient roots of human experience, and we both said we'd share like a queer tantric experience that is real for us in this. So I'll share mine in just a second. Two things happen. So I talked just a moment ago about how part of life can be to embrace identity. And I think part of the gender warfare has been there's only two identities, they look like that, as opposed to if you want to express gender, there can be a beauty, a fabulousness, a funness, a sexiness in it. But gender can be multifaceted and you get to choose, and you should be safe to choose, and you should feel celebrated by your society and by yourself in all gender expressions. But there's the opposite.
Going to interrupt you right there and say in the queer community, there are aspects, it's not that simple.
Right.
Because the queer community, some of it, will judge other members of the queer community for how well they're doing at being trans.
No, 100%. I'm for sure not queer enough sometimes for the queer community. I totally get it.
So we get that the judgment is systemic.
The judgment is systemic. And here's the other thing that I wanted to get to, which is I do believe part of the spiritual process, and this is tantric to the core in my experience, is having fun with your identities. And that's the key word, like fun. Like gender was meant to be like.
As long as you're not being bashed in your high school bathroom for being different, Layla.
Well, but that's what happened that is the pain of it. Gender was weaponized, as you said.
It is weaponized.
It is weaponized.
So the question is,
yeah,
how do we use Tantra to help, as Tantra was so helpful to gay men dying of AIDS?
Yes.
How is Tantra best helpful for people of different gender and sexual preference, the gender and sex minority?
Yes. So let me just finish the thought really quick, which is, so on one hand, to me, the invitation of true Tantra is to actually learn to have fun with your life. And I get it. Like life is painful, life is hard, life is full of trauma. And the invitation is, can you get to a place where you are liberated enough inside of yourself that you can enjoy the play of your life, even when it's traumatizing, painful, there are systems of oppression, the world, like at what point on this planet can you point to where things were like all fine and dandy and everyone was great? It doesn't exist, right? This life is meant to be challenging. To me, Tantra teaches you how to find your empowerment and your liberation through all those systems, right? So no one has to tell you how to be. That's one piece. The other piece is to learn to liberate yourself from your attachment to your identity. I think
this is good.
So it's both playing with your identity, liberating yourself from the attachment from your identity.
Talk more about that,
which
please.
Is that, let's say that I love inhabiting what feels to me like the experience of being woman, right? That is only one tiny little piece of me. And when I start to touch true divine liberation, there's something so much vaster than that. Like that's like one little drop of flavor in the experience of me. And when I go to those places, it's like the divine wants every expression of humanity possible, every expression of gender, every expression of sexuality. To me, when people have all these limited ideas, when I trace them back far enough, they all seem to go to a religious conditioning that taught us that a certain way of being is right or holy or good, and a certain other way of being is wrong or less than or even evil. So when you decimate that spiritually, you can look around and be in holy celebration of everyone, how they want to express, how they want to fuck, how they want to be. And to me, when you really have that lens in your heart, you're looking through the eyes of the goddess, which is eternal love for every expression we could ever have. And that to me is where the truth lies, and where I want more people to have the experience of themselves, which is no matter what is true to you in every moment, God is holding you and seeing you with love.
I like your point about attachment. The most sacred gift we got in human form when we came down here is, hey people, here's the secret. it's all going to change all the time. And what systems have done is tell us things must not change. We have made this rule and this commandment and this edict to keep things the same. So anyone who doesn't fit into the box created by sameness, you must do this all your life forever, or something terrible will happen either now or in the afterlife. That's the box we invite you to step out of.
Yes.
Because we can't do anything you're talking about unless we're committed to change. That our gender will change, our sexual preferences will change. I love saying to people who are like, whoa, I never thought I'd be into this. Yeah, well, this is now fun, but I'll never be into that. I said, call me in 6 months, okay? Because you just opened the change. You walked through the door of change and non-attachment.
Yeah.
And I think what Tantra can do in its practices, in its mudras, in its especially for me, the breath practices, in its practices of slowing down in consciousness, is that it can make change feel easier and safer because we are less rigid. As we all know, a rigid building will collapse in an earthquake. Mm. A building built with some ability to sway has a much better chance of staying upright and getting through the earthquake. We are like those buildings. So anyway, I think that we can. Tantra has so much untapped potential to, if we take its Buddhist incarnations more and more into account, that and practice less attachment to identity, then I think there's a whole lot more facets we can polish on that enlightenment gem.
Totally. Well, that's part of the vision I hold. I'm always super happy for you or anyone else to point out where you feel like, my perspective is warped or limited, or there's things I can't see, to hold with more truth or compassion.
There's all stuff we can't see. But change thing, Layla, that change thing.
I really felt into this for a while, which is like, okay, so my imagining of when, as a drag queen enacts femininity, right? And the joy and the love and the majesty of that. I want everyone to wear gender of any expression that they love with that level of majesty. This is my art. My gender is my art, and I get to play it today. And I would love a world where we respected all forms of art, rose children to be true to their form of art, and could see, whether it was our personal preference or not, the sexiness and the dignity inherent in every aspect of gender as art. That would be the world I would love to see. I don't want to just
see it as gender. I want to see kink as art.
Well, that's you. So that's a whole other topic we can get in. I'm trying to keep that button up here because we can just go forever. No. And I would love, right? There's this. We were in the story that I wanted to tell, right? Like me and Emily Fletcher, I went to Pan's Cave. I don't even know this, almost a year ago now. And typically in our lovemaking, Emily is like, if you wanted to call it, more masculine in the sense that she feels she has an energy cock and she really penetrates, right? And I love to be like really open and receptive. And she's like, right? And I'm like, oh, right. We just have this play so far that has really worked for us. Like that's where our arrow lies.
Love energy cocks. Yep.
Oh, such a good big energy cock, Emily Fletcher. And so we go into Pan's Cave, right? And we go deep in there, and it's so primal and it's so wild. And Pan is this ancient force of chaos, but to me, primordial expression. Before society taught you anything, before anyone said anything was right or wrong. And when we made love in that state, like we were like the cave was dripping on us. We were like opening our mouths for the stalagmites dripping down into our mouths. We're like covered in mud. We're just like, oh my God, it was so rich and erotic. And we both marveled that we lost any sense of gender, any sense of identity. Like for a while we were like aliens fucking. For a while we were like, we would just be anything and everything, whatever was true to the moment. Layla, as I know her, did not exist. Beingness did. Sex from that state, I would say, is far more tantric, if you wanted to go there, in terms of consciousness expansion than any of these ideas of like, oh, I'm such a woman and you're such a man and now we're, you know, like, and I want to say that I love the exploration for me with the massive daddy issues that I have. It's a lifelong exploration for me to be with the masculine and to feel my polarity in that and to feel safe in that. So I've always endeavored, and I'm still trying to find my way as a teacher, of embracing gender expression as something beautiful and art that we can play with, and that having its place to me in Tantra, and also acknowledging exactly as you said, because gender has been so weaponized, it can feel almost, I want to say, like dangerous or threatening to people where they have not felt included, or they have actually felt their lives at risk with people who cannot embrace the full spectrum of gender and hold safety and dignity for that. And this very transcendent perspective, which is when I'm the closest to goddess consciousness, I don't give a fuck about any of those boxes, right? It just becomes about liberated truth. And that expression to me is so much bigger. And that to me is the spiritual place for gender dynamic individuals, right? Or gender non-binary individuals. To me, there can be a form of spiritual truth that they're tapping into, which is that divine force of do what is true for you, right? Do as you like, outside of a mind box telling you how you should be. And so I feel like I can taste sometimes in those expressions like a spiritual truth that is so sacred. And I don't think people have that experience enough, because unfortunately, religions, including Tantra, have been used to try and control people. Even Tantra has been used that way. But that is, as you're saying, not the essence of it. The essence of it is so much more liberated.
It's wild and queer and crazy is the essence of it. And it seems to speak so well to the request, to the desire I hear from most of the people who come to my workshops, which is usually said pretty much this way: I just know there's something more out there and I want to be able to let go and find it. And if you just break down that very simple phrase, yes, there is something more. And everybody's something more is going to look a little different. And their something more is going to look different from that once they get that something more. And that's where I get back to permission and possibilities.
Yeah.
Whether you're on a tantric path, call it a tantric path, call it something else entirely. So finding your something more. I think anybody working with dedication, passion, commitment, consciousness on their something more is likely to wind up in the same room, in the same soup, in the same conscious headspace out there in the ether as the tantrikas, the spiritual kinky people. The world is looking for something more. And Tantra is just a really efficient path to getting there. Everybody wants something more. Everybody wants that feeling of being part of something bigger than themselves. Everybody wants that feeling of feeling powerful and divine. Everybody wants that feeling of no limits, no boundaries, no edges. Everybody wants that. But a lot of people have trouble even dreaming that far because they were told that their possibilities begin and end here. And even if other people have possibilities, their permission to go for them ends here. So yes, a tantric life is the reason we need community in tantric life, in queer life, is that it's very hard to be this weird by yourself.
Yes.
And without the support of community, it can get really dangerous. It can get too scary. And we'll give up. We need community. That doesn't mean you have to learn to love orgies, although sounds fun to me. But
why keep yourself out of that box?
why limit yourself? But community is super, super, super important. And that's what Urban Tantra, I mean, when it started out, it was the name for my workshops. It was the title of my book. But the thing I am proudest of and most grateful for is the community that is Urban Tantra around the world, and how they hold each other and how they support each other, and how it is about inclusion and sharing, not competition, not judgment. And we keep learning and we keep growing. And some days the conversations are really, really, really hard. And sometimes we cry a lot. And on the other side of that, it's just a bigger, more beautiful, more magical community. And I love every one of them.
Well, thank you so much for creating that and being such a stand for that. I can only imagine that field of beauty and magic that gets created, knowing and feeling how much your heart is invested in making sure that everyone feels safe and welcome to practice Tantra.
Exactly. Same back at you, girl.
I know a conversation is good when we don't take the mood until the very end, because I was like too in it with like the tears and the magic and the gender play. My pussy's all happy. But this is my supplement line for feeling amazing. They're called sexy supplements because they help you have more amazing sexual experiences, but more amazing life experiences. This one is called Euphoria. So we actually used to call this exact product Ecstasy.
I can see where that might have got you into a bit of branding trouble.
Basically like Meta and Amazon were like, nope. And I was like, but I want to reclaim our cultural right to ecstasy outside of the drug of MDMA, even though that can be a wonderful drug. And they were like,
too long.
You better change the title. And I was like, all right. We'll change it. Euphoria is cool.
I think that's a very good word.
So what's fun about these, they're meant to be gold, but they're dyed with turmeric. So,
I was going to say they're pretty turmeric.
Yeah.
So 3? Okay.
Yeah, you take 3. And I have
See, it's not even full because Euphoria is a wanted commodity.
Well, it reminds me, actually, I would love, before we carry this home, you have this book that's called Ecstasy is Necessary, right?
I do. And it's funny that you should bring up Ecstasy is Necessary. It's going to be available for a little while longer before it will come off the market briefly while we resell it as a revised edition, because so much changes in the world these days.
Totally.
That I wanted to include some things in the book that weren't in the first edition. I wanted to include a section on when ecstasy is hard. Like I have not only supported people with AIDS, but as you said, people with cancer.
Yeah.
And what do you? And I work with a cancer research organization, a hospital, around sexuality and cancer. And what do you do when sexuality seems impossible or too hard or injured? The other thing I wanted to write about and put in Ecstasy is Necessary was when ecstasy is too much.
Yeah.
So many people, a lot of people, I'm putting my mood down before I melt my euphoria.
You can also take it and then we can keep going.
That some people hit a place, or it comes on them suddenly, where they're suddenly overwhelmed by energy, much of which can be sexual energy. And they absolutely don't know what to do. They think they're going crazy. They're horny all the time. They can't sleep. Everything in their world is changing. They feel like they're supercharged and they're not sure it's in a good way. And this happens to more people than we think. And they wind up going to health professionals who don't know what to do, and they wind up being medicated out of a Kundalini awakening, we would say in Tantra.
Totally.
But energy awakening might be a easier phrase for people who don't want to speak Sanskrit. So anyway, so Ecstasy is Necessary. It's a grab it now. It'll go away for a bit and then it'll come back in its new edition. And just get on my mailing list. You get a free gift if you do at barbaracarrellas.com, and you'll know when it comes out again.
And I loved the concept, and why I think the book is so great is that ecstasy was largely forbidden in our society, like true deep ecstasy. And by our society, I mean westernized societies or societies that got deeply impacted by Judeo-Christian teachings, right? Let's be appropriate. Let's work hard. Let's worship God in silence and stillness, right? And like ecstasy was the pathway to God in most ancient traditions.
Exactly.
And there's this, to me, like, I don't understand how anyone can feel mentally healthy without touching ecstasy on a regular basis. It's such a healing quality where you get back to wholeness and power, and then you can go face all the wild out there, you know, and like not the good wild, the kind of like unhinged wild.
One of the reasons I wrote Ecstasy is Necessary was for people who couldn't find it in sex for whatever reason. To invite them to see it in all these other places in life.
Yeah.
And I did one of my informal, very unscientific Facebook polls. And I think this got more answers than any other one I've ever done. And it was, where do you find ecstasy in life that isn't sex or orgasm?
Yeah.
And the list just went on and on and on. It was everything from political action to food.
Yeah.
Food and nature and dancing and music and being with someone who's dying and being with somebody who's giving birth. And it just went on and on and on and on. And it was, that list alone was this huge invitation to look everywhere for ecstatic experiences.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'm curious if you can teach us one thing about breath and orgasm, because
I was just going to say ecstasy breathing is a really good place to start.
Let's hear about ecstasy breathing, because I did your workshop 10 years ago here in New York City. And one of my favorite practices is that you do this deep inhaling and exhaling, and basically like on the exhale, you go into an orgasmic state, right? So you just expand so deep, and this can really pull you into ecstasy. And so I love that you teach this interface of how we can use breath to expand orgasm, expand ecstasy. You teach us like one usable tool around that.
Yeah, sure. You know from your tantric practice that so much of it relies on breath.
Yes.
So this particular technique, and in a minute, I'll tell you where to get some instructions so you can do it at home. This particular technique has so many tantric sex things included in it that you get a whole little mini workshop just learning this technique.
Yeah.
But right now, all you have to do to start is to breathe a bit more fully and deeply than you usually do. If you want to build up a lot of energy, breathe in and out through your mouth. Intention is on the inhale. Exhale, I just let go. Otherwise, you're gonna not feel so good. Is not a yummy breath. Much yummier. And you can also do nose breathing. That's typically more relaxing, but you find your breath. If the mouth breathing's too intense, use some nose breathing. Breathe more than you usually do, whatever that means to you. And at first, do that while you masturbate, however you like to masturbate. Now, what you're going to find is the orgasm may feel while you're breathing, because you're going to breathe all the way through it. Even when you think you want to stop, you're going to go, oop, I've stopped breathing, and you're going to keep breathing. The orgasm may actually feel like it dances further away. And you're like, what's this? This is a rip. I thought this was supposed to give me a great orgasm. It will, hang on. And just follow the orgasm down the road. What you're doing is kind of charging your entire being. You're giving it a much jazzier container to happen in, sort of like filling a 30-gallon tank instead of a coffee cup of energy. So breathe into the orgasm that eventually happens. That's a good way to practice ecstatic breath. And it also teaches you to breathe during sex, which is really, really useful for those orgasms with a partner. And if you want to learn how to have a full body ecstatic breath orgasm, where you don't even need genitals. There's a link on my website to breath and energy orgasm. And it's an MP3. It's very inexpensive. Download it and I'll talk you through it.
Gorgeous. And what's your website?
BarbaraCarrellas.com. Carrellas, 2 R's, 2 L's.
Yeah, doubling up twice. So just to finish, I'd love to hear, like, what my heart would love to hear is just more queer tantric experiences, even though you were like, let's not create another category. Like, let's maybe not even call it queer tantra.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear that, just to like put it out there of how gorgeous and mystical and magical it is.
Okay. This was a biggie. Annie Sprinkle, Joseph Kramer decided back around 93.
I love vintage queer tantric experiences.
Joe held men's groups. Annie and I had women's groups, and you couldn't mix them. You had to have men's groups and women's groups. And Joseph's, because they won't come. The guys won't come. I don't think the women will come either. Oh, see, no, they got to be separate. So Annie and Joseph came up with Cosmic Orgasm Awareness Week, invited all the queer-ish, we didn't have to be queer, all the weird, crazy, tantric, Taoist, sex intimates that they knew, which were a lot of gay men, because that was his community. And we went to Wildwood in California for a week. And the erotic massage that Joseph had developed was a key component. And when it was my turn to receive, the person giving to me was a gay man and a body worker. And I was breathing. I was doing the breath that I was just telling you about. And I breathe, genital strokes. We had just developed the genital strokes for women because they had only previously been for men. I was the crash test dummy. Annie and Joe were like, they'd mapped them all out. Like, does this work? That works. Oh, that's not so good. Oh, that's great. And so this was the day we were trying them. And I got into this really heightened state, a lot of breath. Did a technique that I call the clench and hold, which is just when your energy is just like buzzing, you hold your breath, clench your pelvis, hold, and then let go, and you journey. And in my journey, a curtain parted, theater person, and a sky was there, and I saw some stars. And then I saw more stars, and then the stars started to talk to me because they were all my dead gay friends. And I was telling them that I missed them so much, that I just really wanted, and life had gotten so hard because by early 90s, it was hell. And I just wanted to let go and join them because they seemed so joyous. And they said, no, you can't. You have too much to do yet. You can't. And we hugged, however you do, celestially, and talked for a while. I said, we've got to go, and you've got to go back to work. We're around if you need us. Bye-bye. And the curtain closed. And just then, my massage person, who was crying because I was crying, he didn't know I was crying, but he was in the energy field. He took a sarong or whatever and put it over my face. And I went, and I was in a grave. And I was underground and I was dead. But it was very, very peaceful. It was pretty wonderful. And I'm claustrophobic, so this is huge for me. And I just got to quietly lie there, dead, and invent my next lifetime. And when I came out of that, I committed to doing what I now do. It was pretty queer.
Full body chills. Also, my next lifetime, I've already decided I want to be a gay male Beyonce. It's like, it's the dream. Thank you.
I'm sure there's many a Beyonce queen out there who'd be happy to help you with that.
So you've already shared people can find you at barbaracarrellas.com. Is there anywhere else that they can follow you, connect with your work?
BarbaraCarrellas.com, Urban Tantra Professional Training Program.com, which you can get to from my website if you don't want to do all that typing. Pick up a copy of Urban Tantra. You can listen to it, read it on your phone, read it on paper, anywhere really. And yeah, and join me at a workshop. It's post-pandemic. We can have live workshops again. Isn't that wonderful? I know.
We had them a little bit during the pandemic, but shh.
I'm grateful to the pandemic for teaching us how much we could do virtually and how much connection we could make virtually. I now do virtual hugs around the world with my hands around my computer screen. For healing circles, I do internationally every week. And those hugs work. You can actually feel them in your heart.
Totally.
So
I've been in awe of what can be done virtually for a long time. Yeah. First time I learned that was when there was a teacher. We were all in Bali. He was in Southern California. And he was like, I'm going to give an energy orgasm across Skype. This is in probably 2011 or something like that. And as I and the Dutch grandmother next to me had throat orgasms as this man channeled energy from Southern California via a Skype medium, I was like, who knows?
It really, I mean, you'd think we'd have dropped into the fact that if everything about this whole internet game is magical, why can't we do magic with it?
I mean, look, that's the game I've been playing in town for a while now.
Yeah.
So beautiful to have you. Thank you so much for everything.
Spend time with you again.
Yes. Also, one of my unfulfilled life goals is to have this pink hair. So thank you for living my dream. I live vicariously through your hair color.
Just rock up to my house if you.
One day soon, I'm going to have the Barbara Carrellas look. I'm going to have my Barbara Carrellas era. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this Tantric Life. I am Layla Martin. This is the home for the realest conversations about sex, spirituality, polarity, conscious relationships, and all kinds of topics that help us live the absolute most incredible lives. Please check out the next episode. Please go ahead and leave your rating and review on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. It's so helpful when you do that. If you want to stay connected to me, the most helpful supportive thing you can do is to head over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address. That connects you to me if you want to study deeper with me, if you want to receive my deeper teachings. I do it predominantly via email. Finally, you can check me out on Instagram at @the Layla Martin. And thank you so much for being here.